Hi, it's Warren Hewitt here. Hope you're doing marvellously well. Today I'm going to break down a song by a band called Robert John and the Wreck called Blame It on the Whiskey. This song I did essentially live with just a guitar solo overdub and a vocal overdub. Actually, I think it was just a vocal overdub at Sunset Sound. So I recorded this at Sunset Sound. There are no drum samples on this. There's no drum editing. It is as live as you can get. You'll get to see it. As ever, please subscribe. Go below and subscribe. Go to producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list, and you'll get a bunch of free goodies, etc. And thanks ever so much for watching, of course, and let's get started. Okay, so this song, as I was talking about, was recorded live at Sunset Sound in Studio 3, which is their newest room. I think it was built in the early 70s. Or maybe the late 60s. And what it's most famous for, I suppose, is Prince. He was there for a couple of years, and he made Purple Rain there, and whatever the album was, the other side of it. I can't remember now. I think it might have been 1999 or whatever. But he did 2 albums there in a row and lived there for 2 years. I think he had a bed in the live room. It's a great sounding room. It's done a lot of records. I use it a lot. The video that I did on the drum sounds with Kenny Ernoff is in that room. I really like it. So the song, you can actually download this song, by the way, for free if you sign up for the email list. It's been available since just before Christmas of last year. The song is mainly live. As you can see, the drums are not edited at all. It's a one drum take. There is no drum samples on it anywhere. We really wanted it to feel like what the band are live. And the editing that is done is pretty minimal. There's some little guitar minor fixes here. There's one guitar overdub. So Chris, who's the lead guitar player, who's also featured on the site, you can see his setup. That's his live take, which has some minor fixes in it. And the only overdub was Robert. And the only reason why I overdubbed Robert, the rhythm guitar player, is because live he was singing and playing guitar at the same time, and I didn't get enough separation. There was too much bleed in the vocal, and there was too much bleed in the guitar. It was just a little too messy. So other than that, it's all live. The keyboard player, Steve, played Leslie live, and there's a Leslie track here. And Steve also sang some backgrounds, which you can hear as well. Okay, so taking it from the top. So it starts here with just Chris playing. This is Dr. Z amp.
Blame it on the whiskey.
Robert comes in on vocals.
Blame it on a bad week. Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen.
And comes Steve on Hammond.
Run and tell your mother. Blame it on your brother. Blame it on the only thing you've ever heard. Tell it in a tall tale. Why you was a raisin.
It's a double verse before a chorus.
Falling like the hardest stone that ever fell. Blame it on a bad dream. No, it didn't mean a damn thing. Anything to keep yourself from coming clean. How you do live?
Cool. So that's the basic live from intro, the way the introduction through to the first chorus. As you can see, it's building pretty gradually. The Dr. Z amp here, the only thing I've done to it is I put a smack plug-in on it. Just compressing it just a bit. Yeah, like 2 dB maximum. But it's, what it's doing is just, it's evening out a little bit of those a little bit of the dynamics on it, but in a pretty pleasing kind of way. This wasn't recorded on tape. It was recorded directly into Pro Tools. Sometimes I'll use my clasp system, which is off of my Studer A80 and then goes into Pro Tools. This wasn't, but I wanted this to feel live. We tracked in one day 10 songs, actually 11 songs. So in 11 songs in about 10 hours after setup, maybe 9 hours. So we came in, we set up for a couple of hours, and then we just tracked solidly right through. And, you know, each song may have had 4, 5, 6, 7 takes, and then we chose the take and moved on. That's how we made the whole record in one day. So this album was done in a day. So with that in mind, tape wasn't really an option financially because it's a lot of tape. A lot of tape. You know, we were making this album on the cheap, but we wanted it to sound amazing. So I think the Smack just kind of just sucked it in enough, took off some of those high transients to make it feel a little warmer. Okay, so here's Steve's Leslie. Some minor editing going on here. What I've got on the Leslie is just a bit of low roll-off. But at the same time, as you know I like to do on a bass guitar, I've also done on the Hammond, is I'm controlling the low end. So I'm compressing it and pushing it, but it's in a controlled manner. There's actually an L1 across it. And as far as effects and stuff, there's a decapitator driving. So it's a little extra distortion. So what I did is I duplicated the stereo file. I've got a 57 on either side of the Leslie cab, and then I think a 421 on the bottom of the cab for the low end. And you've got the spinning portion of the Leslie at the top, and that's mic'd like this on the cab with a pair of 57s. And I've duplicated that stereo file and just trashed it out and added a bit of verb. So it's like a kind of, that's just that on its own. Just gives some grit and a bit of extra verb. And then for my tape simulation, I often use the analog channel. So this is a tape simulator. I've got it on 30 IPS up here. It's a Swiss, so it's basically a Studer simulation. And then after everything's subbed, I'm sending it to another verb, a large room. It's the verb off. Back on. So, you know, it's a live recording. There was some bleed of the Leslie in the rest of the room, pretty minimal, but it's still nice to put a bit of verb. Okay, let's go to our drums. So, as you can see the miking I used was pretty straightforward. I mean, you've got, from the top here, you've got a D112, AKG D112. It's listed. Let's have a listen to that. That's the kick inside the kick. Again, what I would highly recommend to do is to go to the Sunset Sound drum recording one with Kenny Aronoff, and you'll see the exact miking that I'm using here. So here's the D112. But here's really the secret. That's the FET. So that's a FET 47. Now you don't have to use a FET 47. I mean, basically, it's a large diaphragm condenser. I've actually found that most mid-priced $400-500 condensers can do this. It doesn't have to be that expensive. And that's on the outside head. And that's a big part of our kick drum sound. All there is bass lift at 60 Hertz using the Renaissance bass here. And what I've done is I've time adjusted the kick, inside kick, by 43 samples so that the polarity is good. If you see what I mean, it's just nudging. We just make these bigger. It's just nudging that back ever so slightly. Just a tiny amount. See, it's just bringing this back a few samples. So what it is the kick in and the kick out now. The polarity is good, the phase is good. And the kick master here, where that's going through, just has a little bit of compression, no EQ. So this is very natural. This is how it was recorded. That's all natural kick. Now it's a little extra room I put on here, again just a deverb. As you've noticed before in a lot of my videos, I really like, I used to have a room that gave me about a 750 milliseconds reverberation time, so I tend to simulate that. I'm very comfortable with that. Okay, for the snare. For the snare, I've got time adjuster running in phase with my overheads. So what I've done is I've taken the snare top and snare bottom and I've delayed them ever so slightly so that they are in phase with my overheads. I don't EQ the overheads massively. I do EQ some of the bottom end out, but I don't go crazy. So I like to have it all in phase so it's slamming. Okay, as far as the snare top on the EQ, I've just got some top end boost. On the snare bottom, little top end boost again. So here's your snare top and snare bottom. So kick and snare. But what I added in this instance, and I really like to do, is I put a snare shell mic on there. Now the snare shell mic is basically a large diaphragm condenser. I think in this instance I used actually a 414 and it's facing, so here's your snare drum, top and bottom 57. I actually put a 414 back just off the shell itself. Now, there's a lot more bleed, as you can hear. But it gives you some of that metal all together. And then the only other thing here is I've got EQ lift, a bit more brightness of 7K and above on the snare. And there's a verb going on. I'm compressing the reverb, the send to the reverb lightly, so it's more even. There was a lot of ring in that verb, around about 650, so I pulled it out going into it, and there's my verb, using the true verb. And afterwards another EQ lift. So it's just brightening up that verb. Again, you'll notice a lot of the time I do little bits of things, little tiny movements. It's not always like, huge amount of EQ. I find that when you're using, EQs, especially, I don't know, I'm not going to mention different manufacturers, but what I like about the Mac DSP, you see, is it's a very natural sounding, I think, analog sounding EQ, and you can tell I do a lot of little amounts here. I'd rather do small amounts of brightness, compress it lightly, and a small amount more than I would just getting in there and just boosting like 7K by 6 dB, because if I do that, I tend to find that it sounds really brittle and really, EQ'd. And I like to, mix subtly and not do as much work. Okay, so that's my main, that's the most amount of EQ I'm doing with the Mac DSP, where you've got 3 dB at 7K on the top of the snare. Okay, so toms, same thing. I'd use time adjuster to knock them in phase, put them in phase with my overheads again. So they're back 91 samples. The toms, the floor and the rack have got some lows pulled out of them because, to be honest, they were huge. So I had to pull out some of the lows. But again, what I'm doing is I'm controlling it, I'm pulling them out, and then I'm adding a little bit of R-bass back in afterwards. Just so I've controlled the bottom end, then boosting it a little bit more. It's nice and rounded that way. And there's also an L1 just to give me level. It's really good on that floor there. If you watch my live mixing video, you'll see the trick I did there where I gain between the toms. I like to do that. I find that it preserves some of the natural element of the toms because you're still getting a bit of bleed here. It's not a huge amount, but it's just enough to cut through. And then tom verb, I am using, a little bigger. It's just under 2 seconds, and I'm using a Renaissance reverberator. Okay, hats, same thing. On the hats, I use time adjuster, just so there wasn't flamming between my snare and my hats. The EQ is actually quite drastic in this instance for me. without using any kick and snare samples on something like this, I'm probably EQing a little heavier than I normally would because I don't have that extra kick and snare just poking through. So I'm just shaping it just a little bit more. That's probably a little bit more aggressive EQ than I normally would use. Now I use a mono overhead here, rolling off lightly at 199, but it's a slope. It's a light slope. There's no top end boost. The same thing probably out here on my stereo overheads. So there's my overheads. Snare is pretty predominant in there, so that's the reason why the snare needs to be in phase with the overheads. Okay, now next is a couple of sets of room mics. I've got my highs. Again, if you watch the video, you'll see the highs. All I'm doing is rolling gently off at 40 for any low lows. On the low ones, gently rolling off at 66. It's not a steep one. Then there's a mono 67. Again, same thing. Rolling off a little higher. There's a lot of low build up. That's a great mic. So here's all my rooms together. I mean, it's a great sounding drum room, Sunset Sound. And then last but no means least, or second to last I should say, is the Coles, which just gives it a little bit of oomph, and that's just in front of the kick. So altogether we've got this. I mean, that's a good drum sound, just room mics. Now, as you know, I will stick usually a 414 or something like that in a room and set it on Omni, and that's what this talkback is. It's barely in there. Barely audible. Okay, I did use a snare plate because Sunset Sound has a real plate there. So this is what this is. So I sent that off the console live. So as he was playing snare, I was printing this plate as well. So that's from the snare top. There's a bit of EQ here going crazy because there was a real honkiness to it. So I took out that 540 there. Gently rolled off the lows, give a bit more body on 150, then boosted the top end like crazy. And then the MV2, the parallel compressor, just brings the essence of the snare. So that gives us our reverberation on the snare. So there you go. It's all the live mics, no samples, and the reverberation being created by the plate from Sunset Sound, and of course the room mics. Great. Okay, next is our bass. And our bass here, let's have a listen. Now, I'm doing time adjuster again on these to get the DI in phase with the bass. You'll notice if you go through some of my bass videos that I will knock these back. If I zoom in a little bit here, you can see where the waveforms are slightly out, so that will have the time adjuster on it. In this instance, it's 138 samples. I've taken my DI here, and then I've duplicated it and run a little Sans amp on it just for some grit. And then the bass amp is giving us all the bottom end, and I've wiped off all the top end just to give us that. Now the reason why I do that quite often is, and sometimes I'll do it with using the DI, but the reason why I do it with the bass amp in this instance is all I needed was the lows. I didn't want a lot of conflicting top end. I wanted a nice clean top end, and I just wanted something that just gave me the low lows. And then on my bass master, I'm doing quite a few little bits and pieces. I'm adding a lot of mid-range on this EQ to get it to cut. 750 to about 850 is where you get all that real nice honky precision kind of bass sound. As ever, I'm compressing the lows below 250, keeping them even. You'll see that's a trick I do all the time. I'm ducking out of the way of the kick after boosting it there. little extra 100, even more, 800. And then our old friend, the R bass. I use the R bass after doing the cleanup because I find if I use it early on the signal, it just gets so boomy. What's nice is to clean up the bottom end and shape it the way you want and then boost the lows afterwards. That's just me, that's the way I like to do it. I think it keeps it cleaner and tighter. And then I go to L1 for level, just to kind of keep it even. You can hear he's hitting it really hard, but there's other times where it ducks a little bit. So our L1 is leveling it off nicely. So that's our drums and bass. Of course, there's a tambourine here as well that we neglected. Little L2, just might use that, or the Bomb Factory is really nice. And then a little tiny bit of verb. And I'm using about 30% on that. I mean, the drums sound great with no samples and gentle amount of EQ. Obviously, we're blessed in being a really good room and a really great drummer. Andrew's a great drummer. So those two things are always going to help. And no edits. There are no edits on these drums. I mean, this is how we played it. It's tough. If you're recording something live and you've got live bass, live guitars, live drums, you start editing the drums really heavily, unless it's an obvious mistake that nobody else did. But if you start editing them to a grid, you're going to find that your bass no longer feels good. Your guitars no longer feel good. So you have to choose takes. We did a bunch of takes and we went with a take that felt great. It looks like we did 6 or 7 takes here. And by take 7, it was nailed and we moved on. There's other songs we did 2 or 3 takes, and then there was other songs we probably did 10 takes on. But like I said, we cut the whole album in a day. So, okay, here's Robert's rhythm guitar. Little decapitator. Just a little extra huevos. And then some low-end control. That's it. And then what we have is reverb. He's panned to the right, and then the reverb's panned to the left to give it that width. With Leslie we've already done, so we're pretty much through every element of this song. Next is the vocal. I did lightly tune it. I only tune where I hear something that goes out. And I like to work in graphical. If you watch the other video, you'll see me do that. But the vocal is basically an R-Vox directly on the vocal initially.
Blame it on the whiskey. Blame it on a bad week.
So let's just loop that part.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever
seen. Little trim just to make sure I'm getting the right.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen. Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen.
Little light boost.
Blame it on
some
the
slight
only
low cut.
You've ever
Another
seen.
compressor.
Blame it on the
but only at 2 to 1, so it's only gently compressing. Another light bit of EQ.
You've ever seen.
And yes, another de-esser, just to control that. Because when you're boosting the top end of a vocal, you're trying to make the vocal just a little breathier and a little bit more open. Now, obviously, if you just whack a de-esser across it and remove all the S's, that's fine. But what will happen is you'll eat into all the brightness as well. So I do gentle amounts. I'll compress, EQ, little de-essing. Well, I usually compress, de-ess, little EQ, then maybe de-ess, little EQ, little compression. It's light movements because what I'm trying to do is overall brighten the vocal without doing something really drastic and making it sound like he's lisping. Because frankly, I hear that a lot. I hear like really super bright vocals, but with lisps on them because they boost it so bright, then put a de-esser at the end, and then suddenly there's no S's left in it because those S's have gone out of control. So doing small, gentle amounts like that works much better than just doing huge EQ, compression, and de-essing. Okay, so it's pretty simple amount there. I'm then sending to a vocal distortion sub,
Blame it on the only
which is just a lo-fi plugin.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen.
So what that's doing there is just, it's giving me some overdrive on the vocal. So that's like the light distortion there. It's not loud, but it's there just to add a little bit of pizzazz. So next is the low octave with the whisper track, which just gives me a little air over the vocal.
Blame it on the only thing you've ever seen.
Now, with the choruses, I've got a double that comes in on just the choruses.
All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right.
So we just overdubbed a double on there. And then I'm doing my usual distorted echo trick, which runs through the whole song.
All you do is lie. All you do is try to
Just some low cut, not a lot of work on that. And then of course my vocal thickening trick. So that's the vocal thickening trick there. So, now we have Steve, the keyboard player, doing some harmonies in the first verse. Sorry, verse 1B.
Tell it in a tall tale. Why you was raising up here, falling like the hardest stone that ever fell.
So just light compression.
Blame it on a bad dream.
Little low roll off, not
No,
much.
it didn't mean a damn thing. Anything to keep yourself from coming clean.
When the chorus comes in, two-part harmony, stereo.
All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when
Pretty straightforward. Have a listen again, just the harmonies.
lie, try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie.
As you can tell, we're going for pure, full-on 70s, rock. Here's the whole chorus.
All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie. Now you're getting older.
One overdub there, because we're doing a harmony, I believe.
Now you're getting older.
Yep, just a harmony. I don't think Robert's playing it, or is he? Yeah, Robert plays the chord,
Now you're getting
and then Chris just overdubbed a harmony to his own part. So we've got these two elements there, and all it's got on there is a little bit of reverb. Otherwise, it's just straight.
you're still looking over.
I mean, this could have been done on a 24-track 2-inch. I mean, most of the extra stuff here is just doubling up. I could have done that on a console, paralleled out the channels and stuff like that. But this is very much a straight ahead. Two guitars with one guitar overdub, three mics on a Leslie, a lead vocal, a double, and two-part harmonies, doubled, but that could have all been bounced to 2 tracks. I mean, that was the whole idea, to make this sound like it was just recorded like on a 24-track.
Now you're getting older. You're still looking over your shoulder. Everybody's moving on. You're growing colder. So blame it on the whiskey.
That's a nice line there where Chris and the keys play together. Just a great line. And then Steve picks it up here as well with him. And then the bass player. Let's see what he's doing. Just great.
Blame it on your company. No, it really doesn't matter all that much to me. All you do is lie. All you do is try
So I just love that. Look, that's just the live take. You know, there's one edit there where I move something back slightly, but that's just him. You know, he's playing the rhythm lead part, and then he goes into a solo with the slide on. Just starts playing a solo.
All you do is
Harmony comes in. It's just great. I mean, it's like, you know, the way it's supposed to be played. Harmonies.
All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie.
Hammond.
Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie. All you do is try to deny. All you do is lie. Even when you know it just ain't right. All you do is lie.
Great. Good rock and roll band there. So that album was honestly made in pre-production. What I did is I drove to the guys' rehearsal room. They have a rehearsal room in Fullerton. And I went there and we went through some songs. We made changes. And they would work on it. They would send me MP3s. And then I would go back down there, you know, after we had been backwards and forwards on the MP3s and work on the songs again. They worked very hard. They tour a lot. They're like a real rock and roll band. And obviously all of them are very talented musicians. So by the time we got into Sunset Sound to track an album in a day, it was really just a case of like they were rehearsed and they were ready to go. So it's a good lesson in pre-production as well. And also only having a day means you can't get carried away with thousands of overdubs. And you get that where you get two solos in a song that were played live off the floor, and that's the solo. And, you know, Chris wanted to kind of go in there and redo some solos and all this kind of stuff, but we ended up not doing that because we wanted it to feel live. And we didn't use drum samples because we wanted it to feel live. I mean, all of these things worked in our favor. We kept the ambience of the room as much as possible. We used the plate from Sunset Sound, you know, things that are unique to the studio. So, you know, and you can do that in any room. It doesn't have to be Sunset Sound. I've done live recordings and made live records with, essentially live records with artists in rehearsal rooms. In fact, some of the best albums ever made weren't made in proper studio environments. So don't let, you know, not being in a big studio hold you back. Okay, well, thanks ever so much for watching. Please, as ever, subscribe. Go to Produce Like a Pro and sign up for the email list. In this instance, you can actually download the song if you've signed up on the email list if you haven't already got it. Thanks ever so much for watching.